the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site, covering the Arizona Cardinals, and this is episode 429. I will see. I am alone in this show. I couldn't get my crap together to get the show content organized and get Seth on the line earlier today. So it's late on a Thursday night, but I wanted to get some content out on a new show. So I'm flying solo for the first time in a while. It's Minicamp's over, so we're now officially done with the off-season program. And so to kind of close Minicamp off, let's talk about a few things that have been going on as the Arizona Cardinals wrap up the off-season program and head into the summer break. We'll talk about some roster moves they made, talk about some hype that I get a kick out of. A silly question that we heard for some media members, and then training camp schedule has been released. So yeah, a little less banter talking about stuff as it's just me. But the Cardinals wrapped up mandatory minicamp on Thursday, and they're done. So rookies will be around, according to Jonathan Gannon. The rookies will be around for about another week, and Gannon will get out of town for a bit. Get to play dad and husband in a tough transition, moving from Philly to Arizona. But now, the time that's happening between now and the start of training camp, which will be the end of July, is that assistants and position coaches have plans for each individual player for what they need to do, their summer program before training camp hits. Some players can be trusted to basically be gone for a couple of weeks, but Gannon has been the idea. His entire tenure so far was about kind of tailoring things for the players, and this holds true as well. There is almost something individualized per player as to what they're expected to do during the off-season program, so they do not fall behind, so they do not fall down, in their progress towards the season, so they do not decline too much. They need to stay in shape. They need to stay in the playbook. They still need to learn things, but still take the last. This is, starting at the end of July is the long grind from the time of training camp till the end of the season. So starting at the end of July all the way to kind of the second week in January, players are now on full-time football mode where it is basically a 6-day-a-week job. So the Cardinals announced 3 player releases over the last 2 days of training camp, minicamp. Note, they only had 2 practices in minicamp week. They had 4 days that they're expected to be there, but only 2 days of practice. On Wednesday, before their final practice of the offseason program, they cut ties with offensive lineman Julian Davenport and safety Josh Thomas. Josh Thomas has since been claimed off waivers by the Carolina Panthers, and then the Cardinals wrapped things up, ending minicamp by releasing receiver Javon Wims, a tall receiver. And so the Cardinals now have 3 roster spots and are down an offensive lineman, a receiver, and a safety. So if we're kind of looking at what we can expect, I don't know if there will be an imminent roster move that's coming, but it was very clear that by the end of the offseason program, the Cardinals knew that they would not have, they didn't have a place for those 3 players. They would not be making the team. Now, in terms of the receiver room, we can look at the numbers that they have. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 receivers on the roster right now, with the release of Wims, and that's fine. You could probably roll with that entering camp. At safety, they don't have as many players. They have Buda Baker, Kendall Brooks, Andre Sachere, Juju Hughes, Javonte Moffin, Jalen Thompson, and remember, we need to include this. Isaiah Simmons is now officially moving to safety. He'll be moving forward with the defensive backs. He's still listed as a linebacker on the player roster, so they're still that. But when he spoke to reporters on the live stream of the press conference, the graphic that showed safety. We're going to talk about that a little bit coming up. But so they're down a safety, they're down an offensive lineman, they're down a receiver. Generally speaking, when their end of the roster moves like that, they will replace one position with the same position. I don't know if we'll have anything imminent, though, in terms of signings. This will give the Cardinals the opportunity to try guys out. But they did bring in one player in particular for a visit earlier in the week, and that is former Washington Commanders center Chase Roulier. And it is the first movement at all this offseason about the potential of a veteran center. Now, Roulier has had injury issues. He's one of those players, if we recall when John Gaines was drafted, that fell in the category of that 4-4-7 short shuttle, and in that kind of that cheat code offensive lineman type thing. And he has started 63 games in his career out of 69 in which he's appeared since 2017. He's been the starting center for Washington since half through his rookie season. Now, the issue is that the last 2 years he's only played in 10 games. That said, passing game coordinator and receivers coach Drew Terrell would know Roulier. He's a quality player, but it lends itself with that work. Well, not necessarily. It wasn't a reported workout; it was reported visits. So, might have just been more something about the medicals to make sure that he was healthy. But it lends itself to the idea that if they're bringing in one veteran center to look at, they might be bringing in other guys. Now, a name that we've talked about on this show that I've mentioned, that Seth has mentioned, that I've read about, Ben Jones, former Titans center, also still out there unsigned. Pelt Elfline qualifies as a guy, and on top of that, was with the Vikings previously. But yeah, in terms of the centers that are available, you've got Roulier, he's 29 years old. Rodney Hudson, no. Ben Jones, 33, Titans. Pat Elfline, previously with the Panthers, but started with the Vikings, and so there's offensive staff, there's coaches who would know him. Justin Britt, Nick Martin, Matt Skura. Now, they seem to be cool with right now with Yelda Froholt. We'll see if that moves forward, but the at least the visit of Roulier suggests that they're not done with the center position, and perhaps they've just been biding their time for the moment right now, considering that if their guy's coming off injuries, one Roulier injury. He had the leg injury that ended his season after only 2 games. Ben Jones was released on a failed physical type situation, and so you could be seeing a center. But in terms of other positions like safety or receiver, likely if they go a different, I think perhaps might be the only position where we might see anyone of note would be at center. Especially with the Roulier visit. Everyone else, any other position they might decide, they're probably just going to be back of the roster guys. People, we like to call them camp bodies. I think it's kind of like that. But they're guys who are going to be competing at the back of the roster as general managers like to churn the back of the roster. That was a Steve Keim saying, but every general manager does that. So keep an eye out of that. Coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk a little bit more and discuss some hype about a player and how, it's off season, whatever, but just be prepared. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. You're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web, and if there is one thing, if you've been a Cardinals fan for a while, if you've paid attention to the offseason, you've paid attention to training camps, if there's one thing that we are good at doing, it's on picking a receiver to hype up, only to have that player probably underperform or basically the hype will have been oversold. They undersell their performance, and that's not necessarily has anything to do with the player. It just happens to be, this is the time of the year when we're grasping it, and especially with the team, the way the Cardinals are set up to struggle this season, any bright spot would be great, right? It makes sense. So here's the latest. Michael Wilson, one of the Cardinals' 2 third-round selections. He's getting a lot of play. How much he's light years ahead where he was in rookie minicamp, which, by the way, he should be. They don't know anything coming out of college. Rookie minicamp, I'm sure, is a whirlwind, and now he's actually, that's fine. So Michael Wilson is the latest to get the off-season receiver hype. Could he turn into an impact player? I'm not saying he won't. There are some metrics that suggest that he could. He's got a very interesting athletic chart profile, but the quickness, the immediate quickness, is amazing. I think his 10-yard split was in the 90 percentile. We talked about that on one show, but his overall 40 time less than desirable for someone. But he has size. Kind of what kept him from thriving at Stanford were injuries. They weren't soft tissue injuries, which was kind of the Rondale Moore situation, but bone injuries, which is also a concern. But now with DeAndre Hopkins gone, Wilson's been playing. He's been practicing at all the different positions, but he has been getting work at the X. And let's be honest, that gets people excited. They think he's going to have a big role. As of right now, let's be real. He's probably number 5 on the depth chart at the receiver room because you've got Hollywood Brown, you've got Rondale Moore, you've got Zach Pascal, you've got Greg Dortch, and you've got that's probably it. And then you've got a bunch of other guys, but that includes Michael Wilson. So, but I just kind of want to go back in time a little bit with the hype. I'm not saying dump on him, but I want perspective. Just keep a perspective. Okay, who have we hyped up the receivers over the last several years? Okay, last year, well, who was the talk of the receiver? Andy Isabella's progress. How much he improved. He looked at the ball. He was doing great in camp. What happened? Nothing. Nothing happened with Andy Isabella has been his entire career so far. 2021. Who were we hyping in 2021? That would be Rondale Moore, who was drafted in the second round that year. His speed, the beginning of the offseason, promising. He was a guy that Cliff Kingsbury loved, and in fairness, Rondale Moore did flash, especially early on his rookie year. Things fizzled after that. After about the Green Bay game, after he muffed a punt and he didn't haul in a pass, the ball off his hands, it was intercepted. Things kind of fell off from there. So the hype was real that rookie year. Was he impactful? Yeah. But his production as a rookie was underwhelming for what we were predicting, right? He had 54 catches for 435 yards on the touchdown, averaging 8 yards a catch. Important to note, last year, Greg Dortch also was hyped up as well. And that hype seemed to be fairly real because anytime he got significant playing time, he produced. The problem was he couldn't crack the rotation if there wasn't an injury, except for late in the season. So his impact was minimized by his playing time. So the hype was oversold to what happened. 2019, that's when the Cardinals, drafted, 2020 is an interesting one because it was the COVID year. Training camp wasn't open. But Keyshawn Johnson, we'll talk 2019, 2020. Keyshawn Johnson got a lot of play. 6th-round pick out of Fresno State, highly productive in college. The talk, his route running and his hands were amazing. He really stood out in training camp. He got hype. However, we know what happened with those things. Keyshawn, his hands weren't that great in the pros. His lack of athleticism and speed were in the way, and he's sort of fizzled out. He's had a couple other opportunities, but did Keyshawn Johnson really do anything in the pros with the Cardinals? No, certainly not. He stuck around in the league, but so that was another player who underperformed. He finished with a total of 36 catches in his rookie season, were his career high. So yeah, you just remember receiver hype. There's gonna be someone every single year. 2018, it was Trent Sherfield. Trent Sherfield got now. Granted, he was undrafted. He was an undrafted guy. Steve Wilkes talked him up. Sherfield also basically every year that Sherfield was in camp, he also got hyped up. Now, he was a stud on special teams, great gunner. But come on, he was a number 5, number 6 receiver in the room, and you wouldn't want to play him over the other receivers that you had necessarily. He just is coming off his best season in the pros, playing in Miami. He had 30 catches, 417 yards. But his most impactful year was back in 2018 with 19 catches with the Cardinals. Nothing against him, but it's just more evidence of kind of how things go. Other names before that, Jerron Brown. Jerron Brown is a fine player, but the talk of him being like a number 2 receiver, no. We've Stephen Williams, names that you've heard before. There have been receivers hyped up every single year whose performances has underperformed the hype for sure. If I can say that there's probably one receiver hyped, especially young rookie type guy, John Brown, back in 2014, Smokey Brown, he caught the eye of Bruce Arians promptly in the offseason program and ended up having a nice impact on the season as a rookie. So in that sense, I would say that probably John Brown's hype was not overdone based on what we got from that. But yeah, so it's a yearly. This is a yearly exercise for sure. It is a yearly exercise in offseason hype. So will Michael Wilson be an all-pro? Will he catch 80 passes? Will he go have 1,400? No, don't expect that. Don't expect that. Can he carve out a nice niche on the team and perhaps develop into a contributor? Absolutely. I don't doubt that. But what terms if he has 45 catches this year, I think that's a win as a rookie. So that's we'll go with that. Coming up next on the Rise FC Red podcast, the best Cardinals talk on the web. What will the defense look like with Isaiah Simmons playing safety? That's coming up next on Rise FC Red. You're back on the Rise FC Red podcast, the best Cardinals talk on the web. Now that we know that Isaiah Simmons is going to be playing safety, this question came up. What do you think it'll look like potentially with Isaiah Simmons, Budda Baker, and Jalen Thompson all back there? Interesting question, right? as if those three players have not been on the field for the Cardinals defense each of the last 2 years. Yes, I get what the question is asking. However, Simmons was a cover guy last year. He was a cover guy. That's where he played most. So he was playing defensive back most of last year. And they had Buda Baker and Jalen Thompson. So, yeah. What are the possibilities with Simmons, Buda, and Thompson? We've seen it. That doesn't mean it's not going to be impactful. And having a new defensive scheme, new head coach, defensive head coach with a new defensive coordinator won't make things better. But let's not forget the last 2 years. The fact that Buda, JT, and Simmons have all been on the same time on the field doing a lot of things. And yes, this is going to be a different defensive scheme than what Vance Joseph had. Buda and JT are going to play probably the roles somewhat that they've been doing. Buda can make his impact a lot of places. Jalen Thompson is very reliable on the back end. He'll probably continue to have him do the same things like that. And Simmons, while he can be a safety, let's not kid ourselves on the fact that a lot of safeties now do kind of linebacker things. So could he play in the box as a safety? Yeah, kind of like a linebacker would. What's the plus about a guy like Simmons? He's built like a backer. Could he cover in the slot? Yep, totally. Might he be used on the back half? Yep, totally. So if you want to play too deep, could you drop Simmons back with JT? Let Buda be in the box? Yep. Could you play one safety high? Have Isaiah covering time? Yep. Here's the thing. I'm interested in seeing how everyone is deployed, yes. But the fact of the matter, whether Simmons is called a linebacker or whether Simmons is called a safety, you can do most of the same things from a linebacker base or from a safety base. They can kind of do the same thing. I don't expect anything different from that. So what will look like, that's honestly, it's going to depend on a lot of how they do it. I could see, truly, and Walter Mitchell, a guy, I will say this, for On Revenge of the Birds, I do laugh at some of the stuff. He did write a piece for Revenge of the Birds on Seth's site about the 5-2 monster that Nick Rallis and Jonathan Gannon might be bringing, and that kind of makes sense because they're still built kind of as a 3-4 on paper, and a 3-4 defense when you're talking base is, for all intents and purposes, it is a 5-man front for rundowns with 2 backers in space, and then you have your defensive backs. Now, what are you going to do for that? If you look at the Eagles, could Simmons be doing what Avonte Maddox did? Possibly. Could he do what Kaiser White, who's now, I'm going to assume that Kaiser White's going to end up being the Cardinals' Mike this year at linebacker. And then Simmons can do what Kaiser did, which was a lot of stuff in coverage as a linebacker. Now, we got to remember that Kaiser White came out of college as a defensive back and was moved to linebacker. And so, kind of what Simmons was initially. He was converted to a linebacker, although he was doing still kind of defensive back stuff. So there's lots of things we could see in Simmons, calling him a safety, whatever. By the way, he practiced with the defensive backs all last year. So this is not new. This is not new. What we're now seeing behind, he kind of admitted, he spent a lot of time going to different position meetings. So while he was on the field practicing with the defensive backs, doing defensive backs drill, he would spend time in the meeting rooms with the linebackers and with the safeties. That will be cut down now because everything that he's going to be doing will be from a safety perspective in that sense. So, yeah. But let's remember, Baker, Thompson, and Simmons have been playing on the field for a while. nothing new there. Coming next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk. Let's talk about the last little bit on this show, on this shorter episode, and then hey, Cardinals announced training camp. We don't have the exact details as when the team reports. I'll get more of that with the media logistics email that'll come later, that'll closer to the start of training camp. But good thing to know, with Jonathan Gannon as head coach, not much changes. The Cardinals have 11 open practices, and again, as it's been since the COVID days, fans will need to get a digital ticket to enter training camp practices. Not that big a deal. It might sell out. But yeah, they start July 27th and go up into the first preseason game. If we go way back, there used to be more. Like I believe with Bruce Arians, I believe there were as many as 17 open practices during training camp, and with Steve Wilkes and Cliff Kingsbury, they kind of condensed that down, and so that open training camp sort of scenario was just up until the first preseason game. Now, they continue to have training camp schedule for the second preseason game, and then usually they break camp and then do mock game week on the... Yeah, they usually do a mock game week for game 2, preseason game 2, and the preseason game 3. They're wrapping things up, but then they're working at the Tempe facility before they make final cuts and things like that. So in terms of what's new this year, nothing's really new. Training camp still at State Farm Stadium. We got back together Saturday. You've got the red and white practice. All the practices this year are afternoon. That is something that's different, because with Cliff Kingsbury sometimes mix it up, and they would have morning practices sometimes that were open to fans. And, honestly, on a Tuesday, 8:30 a.m., how many fans are going to be able to attend? But so these are all consistently afternoon practices, and it looks like, I'm guessing, is that they will have the traditional training camp type schedule that we've seen in years past, or that I've seen in years past, where they will have a walkthrough in the morning. That is close to the media, even though you can still see things. You can usually see the walkthrough stuff from the press box, and then they'll have the practice in the afternoon, and that'll have that they go. So in terms of training camp, nothing's changed. You need a ticket this year, like you have for the last 2 training camps. State Farm Stadium, free entry, free parking. There'll still be fan experiences. In that sense, even as the league has changed a lot of things, training camp really hasn't, and that's good to see. So we now have a target date. Recording on June the 15th. You'll get this if you have subscribed. Come on, subscribe to the show already. Just that way it downloads automatically to your device. Ready to listen. It's probably on the 16th when you get it. July 27th is the target date. That's the first practice, and starting next week, if you're a season ticket holder on Monday, you can start reserving tickets, and then if you're not, I believe it's Wednesday, for the general public can begin to reserve their training camp free digital tickets. And so, yeah. So we've got 5 weeks-ish or so left. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. 6 weeks to the day of recording before we are back together watching Cardinals football. And that's what you need to do for this episode. I'm Jess Root. This is episode 429. Be back again next week and beyond with more Cardinals content here on the Rise of Sea-Red podcast. Thanks, as always, for listening.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.